I'm delighted to have with me for another 20 minutes, Juliette Pugliesi, who is the Nature Manager at BSR. Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good, and you?
Grab a seat. Right, okay, I'm going to switch that one out. Bring that one in. That's empty. There you go. And I'll let you kind of fill your own one up.
Yeah, I'm going to fill it.
How you doing? You were listening in on our chat?
Yeah, a bit.
These are conversations, no doubt, that you have at length a lot of the time with your clients, with your network, with your colleagues.
Yes.
Take me back to your story and how you got involved in this world.
Well, I actually grew up in the countryside, in a very small French village, not that far from here, actually,
okay.
But surrounded by oak forest and rivers. So I was really surrounded by nature, and I was really impressed by nature when I was a child. I could spend hours looking at the river, the plants, trying to find animals and stuff like that.
I'm there.
You're there. You're in the river.
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember I feel deeply passionate about nature. I remember also being in the local newspaper, for example, when I was 10 years old, because I was able to recognize a specific type of owl, a bird.
As in a tweet?
Yeah. So yeah, I was really passionate about nature. And my favorite cartoon were basically wildlife documentaries.
Yeah.
Maybe too much. I maybe watched too much wildlife documentaries. This is why
I don't think you can watch too many wildlife documentaries. I don't think that, yeah.
So I actually went to Kenya in a wildlife conservancy to protect and take care about the giraffe.
The very tall,
tall one.
Yeah.
And there is actually 9 species of giraffe. I don't know if you know that. But the one I was looking for and protecting was the Rothschild giraffe. They're well known because their legs are white. So it's like white socks, basically. And my tipping point was basically I realized that we do have a toy when we were young, which is called Sophie the giraffe. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Here in France.
Here in France.
The little
rubber.
Is it the squeaky one?
Yeah, the squeaky one.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I'm maybe older. You have, I don't know, baby dolls or other kind of plastic toy.
I'm sure there is an equivalent in every country will have its own Sophie the giraffe.
And I realized that there is more Sophie the giraffe in the world than actual giraffe.
Okay.
So it was actually my tipping point, and I was thinking, like, we need to take care about biodiversity. We need to make sure that it actually exists for, the future, in the long term. So this is why I actually started to work on helping businesses to assess their risks and their impacts on biodiversity. Because obviously we are the main cause of biodiversity loss, us as human beings, and we're not here today at ChangeNOW to play the blame game. We're here to find solution. So this is why I actually started to work with companies on biodiversity topics. And
so let's just dig into that work a little bit. A lot of the conversation has historically been about measurement, and I don't really, unless you want to, dig into the measurement, but we had such a kind of clear overview of that from Benjamin. But just where do you think we are now in terms of the challenge?
Yeah, that's a good question, and this is almost the question I had every day from our corporate member. What are the different metrics I could use on biodiversity? Where should I start as a company?
Yeah.
I would say there is maybe 2 things that to know about biodiversity and the specificity of biodiversity. The first thing is we need to stop dreaming about having one single metric that will encompass all the biodiversity aspects. This would be obviously a set of metrics rather than one single metric. And the second is we need to look at the local level, and at some points we need to go at the landscape level. Because if I take the example of a giraffe, there is no giraffe here, right. Because biodiversity is so locally specific that we need to go on the ground. And on the different metrics that the company can use, I would say, I rely on science, and there is IPBES, which is the equivalent of IPCC, but for biodiversity, the group of experts that are actually publishing reports on the state of nature. They're saying that there is 5 main pressure that we have on biodiversity, or driver of natural loss, basically. And for each of those 5 pressure, there is actually KPI for companies. The first one is land use change. I'm sure all of us are aware about deforestation. We discussed that earlier. So the equivalent is the meter square of land or area converted. The second one is climate change, and companies are super mature on climate change right now. So they do have GHG emission, which is a KPI we should take into account for this one. The third one is overexploitation of species. I think for this one of the main examples might be fisheries, because all of us know that we have an overexploitation of fishes stock. But there is also, for example, water. Water could be a resource that is overexploited. So basically taking into account meters cube of water use, or gallon if you're in the US.
Yeah.
And the fourth one is pollution. So basically there is, you could have pollution. This one is kind of a tricky one, because you could have pollution in the air, you could have pollution in land and in water, in ocean. I would recommend starting with fresh water and soil, because those are the easiest to track, but it also depends on the industry you're working with.
Yeah.
And the last one is invasive species. And this is my favorite one, because no one's talked about this one.
Yeah.
But this is basically when a species is not supposed to be in this ecosystem, they're starting to grow and to threaten other endemic species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's obvious if you run an organization or if you are in an industry that has a direct relationship with nature, they can come to you and you can help them through understanding that process. But there'll be lots of businesses here that are services, and that are several steps removed from a direct, you work in an office, obviously you compute in the cloud and the rest of it. What are the things that organizations like that need to think about, and how do you help them understand their relationship with nature? Yeah,
that's a good question, and we're also working a lot with tech companies as well. So obviously the link is not as direct, for example, as a food and ag company or as Caring, who is actually directly involved with raw materials.
Or as you say, fisheries and forests.
Yeah, but this framework is actually applicable to all different kind of companies. The only thing is you will need maybe to go upper in your value chain, obviously. So I would say,
so look at where we've been and where we are. In terms of where we're going to, what are your goals and what are your hopes?
Sorry?
What are your goals?
Yeah, my
and
goals.
What are your hopes?
Yeah, so my goal is actually working more. So obviously, as a company, you need to work on the assessment, which is a starting point. Then you need to develop ambitious strategies and ambitious roadmaps. So I would say I would love to work more on that kind of project, obviously. I recently read that there is only, among the 350 leading companies, there is only 6% that actually have time-bound goal related to deforestation. Only 6%, which is nothing.
Yeah.
So I would encourage everyone just to start setting targets and commitment about the KPI I mentioned previously. And my hopes, actually, for the future is actually that I have more. I have a different hopes. I hope that the new CSRD that is actually coming will help companies to understand their materiality impacts on nature. So I think there is upcoming regulation that will be forcing companies to address those issues. So I'm very glad that they are happening.
So regulation has to be part of this.
Yeah, sure. And the second is I'm also an associate professor in university, and I do see that there is lots of youth and just people that are really keen to change things, and just I really trust them.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because so often this discussion about what the future business will look like is driven by a younger generation of entrepreneurs who have a different understanding of where we're at. In your relationship as a teacher with this new generation of thinkers and doers, what do you see happening there? Are they, what's exciting you about what they're coming up with?
They are very curious about practical solutions. They are pretty much aware about the state of nature, nature laws. They're really keen to learn more about what are the different tools we could use. So most of the thing I'm happy to share is basically the existing tool, the different approach that we could have to tackle and to avoid and reduce your impacts on nature, I would say, yeah.
So this is a room, a conference full of not just thinkers, but people who are doing things. What's your call to action? What do you want people to do?
My call to action is I think every company could act. As we were saying, it's not because you belong to the tech sector that you need to not taking care about nature and biodiversity. I would recommend to have this nice thing, which is act. The first one is assessing your impacts on nature. Mm-hmm. Second one is to commit. We need to have more commitment. There is still a lot of progress on that. And the last one is transformation. Mm-hmm. And I think transformation will happen with good roadmaps, good KPI, but also a good governance. And I think it's key. We mentioned about data in the previous roundtable. Of course, data is a point, but I would like to imagine if, for example, if we have all the data that we want, if we are able to assess all the impact that we have on nature and biodiversity, the perfect data, let's imagine in a perfect world, will it really change the way companies behave in the daily life?
Will it?
I'm not sure.
What will?
I think having the right governance, defining the role and responsibility inside the company. I really trust as well the fact that maybe boards should be trained a bit on sustainability issues. The leadership needs to be more aware about those issues in sustainability and biodiversity. Mm-hmm. And I also think that maybe compensation will help a bit. There is a very good example of how compensation and actually having some KPIs related to biodiversity into the compensation scheme of different people, could be leadership, but also company as individuals, would help.
So I'm really curious. I'm glad you mentioned the role of governance and board composition.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a wider conversation about B Corps and CICs and the rest of it. But we are seeing organizations doing some pretty innovative stuff, like putting nature on the board.
Yes.
Does that work?
Yes, it works. And I encourage all of you to look at a company whose name is Faith in Nature. They're based in the UK, and they have done this amazing and very innovative work just to put someone in the board that is actually representing nature interests at the board level. This is a rotative sit, I would say, so they're just changing from time to time, and actually brings more nature in the agenda. So they were very happy with this outcome. I understand that this is maybe innovative, but this is starting and this is coming, so I think we should look at it.
And when you have these kinds of discussions with organizations,
yes,
what are the practical steps that you need to go through to make something like that happen? Because it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
But putting it, actually making it happen, that's a different thing, right?
Yeah, agree. I think it's starting by baby steps. So first, doing a session or a training to the board, just explaining what is nature, what is biodiversity, but not only about species, but how does it relate to business. I think it needs to be very tailored to it. And we do that at BSR. We have a specific team working with boards because it's a specific audience as well that needs to be trained on that. And then maybe you could start having those conversations about how nature interests are represented at the board level. But I think, yeah.
So I want to be back on this stage in a year's time having this conversation again with you. To all the leaders in this room, yes, all the people that have influence or responsibility at an SLT level or are on boards themselves, what do you want them to be able to say they have done this time next year in terms of elevating nature at a governance level in their organizations?
I think maybe it would be good as well. So far, CSR is still a department that's still very siloed.
Yeah.
So I would encourage like maybe to spread it a bit, CSR. And we had the concept at BSR that we called systemic CSR, which is like not really only focusing on the CSR department, but also looking at what the supply chain team is doing, the purchasing team, the legal team as well must be involved, the finance team. So I would recommend maybe to spread CSR across those organizations, maybe by actually everything is related to people. So if you change, for example, the job requirement of someone and adding a line related to CSR strategy, including the biodiversity strategy, maybe it's going to change a bit, I think.
A question that we went through with the panel prior to this, we cannot wait for perfect.
Exactly, yeah. I 100% agree with this one, yeah. We need to start now, and we need to assess like impacts on nature and yeah, setting the commitment. Even if the data is not perfect, I think we should get started, yeah.
We're almost out of time. What's next for you?
What's next for me? That's a good question. I will pursue my journey. I mean, as soon as I would say that I wish we could have more real giraffe in the world. So I will keep to pursue my fight for that and working with companies on nature topics.
Juliette Pugliesi, thank you very much indeed for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.